Could Janemba have made a great main villain in the Dragon Ball series, or was he only good for the movies? Well, to answer your question, alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today giving you another community response about Janemba, and interestingly enough, as we see from the results, Janemba is actually being said in the polls to have been a great villain in the main Dragon Ball series itself. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video. Geekdom and I are going to have this discussion with you today. So the first thing we got to talk about is what could have been a legitimate point of the main Dragon Ball series where they could have turned the Fusion Reborn events into the actual main timeline. The best point would really to be a scenario in which Goku as a Super Saiyan 3 or Gotenks managed to kill Fat Buu or Super Buu, and Goku just went to the afterlife to live without the Elder Kai giving up his life to bring Goku back. Now here's the thing, with those circumstances put in place, Geekdom, can you see them turning the Fusion Reborn story itself into an actual arc?
I can, but it would require some tweaking. You know, we've learned from Battle of Gods and Resurrection F and Super that the idea of taking the events of the film and just stretching it out, I don't think makes for a very compelling television story, much less a manga story. I think you would have had to have changed some things and really drawn it out. That being said, I do love Janemba. I'm a huge fan of Janemba. I think he's one of the coolest Dragon Ball villains that we have in the films. He looks like the devil. I love the concept of character that is pure concentrated evil, and that he's, you know, personified physically, and that he's so evil and demonic from hell that he was able to cause adverse effects to the afterlife. I really like that kind of character. And I like the idea of that being an arc, but it would require some rewrites. Because the one thing about Janemba that I will say is that he's kind of a boring villain. Not when it comes to his powers, but when it comes to his motivations, when it comes to him. He doesn't even talk. He's kind of like
Kid Buu.
You know, like Kid Buu. Yeah, but the thing is, Kid Buu was only around for a few episodes before they killed him off. You know, and Kid Buu was cool, but you can't do an entire arc with a villain who doesn't speak and just destroys. Unless you have some twists and turns. You know, when you're telling a story in television, you have to have your twists and your turns and your development, your character arcs. So, long story short, or in this case, short story long, I think so, but it would have required a lot of rewrites and a lot of real expansion, I think.
I think you make a great point there, Geekdom. So in essence, you're saying that if you're gonna take a mindless villain, you know, obviously we've seen a lot of these villains before where you look at Harudegarn or if you look at Janemba, you're saying those types of villains fit perfectly if it's just an action-packed condensed movie. And even if you take Broly in movie 2 and 3, I mean, he really didn't talk in those movies as compared to the first Broly film. Those work better for movies, but if you're gonna stretch out an entire arc about a rage monster, that wouldn't work. My thing is, I think when you look at Janemba, I think obviously his character design is awesome, even more so that we even said in our fact video in the past that Toriyama loved the design so much that he didn't even want any changes to be made to it. And I think the thing that really separates Janemba from all of the other villains is the fact that he has probably the most unique move pool out of any other Dragon Ball villain that we've seen. Like his ability to like warp dimensions and fight and on a completely different plane from all the other characters.
Alter reality.
Right, all of that alternate reality bending and stuff, I think makes him an awesome character. And I also think that if you were to make him a main villain in the Dragon Ball series, you could have kind of stretched it out in a way where you make a major fight against his fat, immature, childish form that says Janemba, and then fight against his Super Janemba form later on, and that could have been a shock transformation as opposed to obviously characters like Frieza and Cell that we kind of already knew from the beginning that there were hints that they could transform. Janemba's transformation could have been a genuine shock, and he would have transformed into like a completely badass looking form, kind of similar to like when you play Pokemon and you see like Dratini and Dragonair like evolve into like Dragonite. Like it would have been like something really awesome to see the transition in its appearance. But what do you think about his techniques?
I love his techniques. I love the fact that he can materialize weapons at will. I like the fact that he can create portals at will. I mean, I love it. And one thing that we should state, you know, based upon what you're talking about, is that Janemba was directly inspired by Majin Buu. You know, a lot of these Dragon Ball movies, I don't know if people have picked up on this or not, but they're usually inspired by what's going on in the series, which is why, for example, Goku and Vegeta had just fought. Then a little while after that, the Turles movie comes out, Evil Saiyan versus Good Saiyan. Then you've got, you know, Goku and Frieza. The Cooler movie comes out right around then, you know, another member of Frieza's race. So during this time, you have the fat, immature, childish, you know, baby Fat Buu. And if you remember, when he became Super Buu, that was totally unexpected. I mean, that's the thing. Now, because Dragon Ball Z's been on the air for, you know, decades, we know everything. But when I first saw that fan sub when I was younger, I was pretty surprised that I had no idea that was coming. You know, Fat Buu fights the Gray Buu and they become the Super Buu. Super Buu is pretty much, you know, Super Janemba. It's the same idea. You know, you have the fat and he becomes like a more dangerous, psychotic, I guess you could say, semi-muscular version of himself. But of course, Janemba didn't speak, you know, and that's of course based on more of the Kid Buu thing. I would actually argue that the most interesting movie villains are probably the last two. You know, Hirudegarn and Janemba, because Hirudegarn has a tremendous backstory. Again, they're kind of mindless monsters, but their backstories are interesting enough. As far as character goes, like cool characters, I would probably say that Cooler, and that's not a pun, is probably my favorite because he's a very interesting character, the way he acts, the way that he, you know, is different from his brother. He's kind of spiteful, but in more of a family honor type of way. I really respect that about him. He doesn't think that his henchmen are beneath him. Like, I really love that character. But Janemba, as far as just cool factor goes, demonic dude, just, I've always loved that villain. Always. And I'll tell you what, he was a big hit back in high school because before that movie got dubbed, I remember people were printing out his picture. Like, he was a big deal before anybody even knew who he really was.
And I think if there's something else we can talk to more so about Fusion Reborn itself, going back to that, if this movie was to be turned into an actual arc, I think they could have actually have done a better job when it came to the villains that came back from the afterlife fighting against all of the characters on Earth. And I think that would have been
They did
really
it in GT, man.
Exactly, but GT, similar to Fusion Reborn, did it over like the span of like 4 or 5 episodes. This could have been something that could have gone on for a longer period of time, like seeing Goten and Trunks and Gohan like refighting against Frieza and Cell, and instead of Gohan killing Frieza in one punch and becoming Saitama, you know, they could have actually have made like Frieza and Cell a lot stronger and then have serious villains actually attacking the Earth that actually pose a major threat to Gohan, Goten, and Trunks, as opposed to, well, all of these guys are now super weak because everybody now of the main characters is super strong. And it kind of made like the villains that came to Earth very comical, kind of similar to what we saw like the dictator based on Adolf Hitler coming. They were more there for comic release as opposed to being an actual genuine threat to the Earth. And I think it would have been much more interesting to see the villains coming back more fleshed out. What do you think of that?
To make it a full-fledged Dragon Ball Z arc, I'm not saying it has to be as long as the Buu arc or as short as the Battle of Gods arc, but a good, you know, let's say 35 episodes, let's just say that, 35 episodes, you would have to do some extreme rewrites. And you're right, the Frieza and Cell thing would have been good. But what I do find interesting is that in the German version of Fusion Reborn, all the scenes with the Hitler character have been removed because of laws in Germany, you know, against Hitler. So it would have been interesting if it was an arc, you would have had entire chunks of episodes removed, entire plot points taken out, change the story and make it more of an actual, I guess you can call it like, you know, an actual story, not just a movie story.
Right, and to add to like what you were saying about the whole Hitler thing, even the English theatrical release, for those of you who don't know, when they were showing it on Cartoon Network, that one also didn't have Hitler in it too, so that was really for the uncut version. But one cool thing I think could have really been awesome if they made this into an arc would have been they could have taken a lot of the fighters that fought against Goku and Pikkon in the tournament and they could have given them more roles, more development. So we could have seen more of Pikkon instead of just making him scream. We could have seen Pikkon, you know, actually using his tornado technique and all of the things that we saw him use against Goku and more in this fleshed out arc.
having just a big fight for 20 episodes, that doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't. I think that Frieza Saga taught us that. I think that it has to be more of like, okay, they go in there against Janemba, they fail, kind of like maybe the Zamasu thing, then they have to regroup and think of something else, or maybe Janemba comes to Earth and starts wrecking, shop there, and then, again, there's different ways you can take it. I think it would have to be redone, for sure.
So guys, that has been my video for today. Overall, my final consensus is I don't think that Janemba would have made a great villain for an actual story arc, because of the fact that I think if you stretch a limited personality over so many episodes, it wouldn't have worked. However, if you can write the story in a way where you just make Janemba the mindless monster and have Frieza and Cell and the other previous villains be the primary, I guess you could say, cerebral villains of this arc, I think it could have worked.
You know what? Here's an idea. What if we find out that Janemba was actually a plot from the Makaio Shin, and maybe that's like another side villain, like there's actually a Makaio Shin who wants this to happen? Like a Zamasu and Goku Black situation. There's tons of ways they could take it.
Right, and they could have involved things with the Bora and all of the other stuff too. So, with everything else said, guys, let us know what you think in the comment section below about Janemba being a villain in the actual main series as opposed to just being a movie villain. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And please check out my bro Geekdom in the description.
You don't use that anymore, dude.
No, I don't, so that's why I think it's funny.